Hey, thanks for leaning into this session. Joanne and I, married 27 years, been in ministry together, both ordained ministers, and we are honored and thrilled to have this incredible lineup of co-pastors. And there's different expressions of what that looks like. Team pastoring is another language you hear often. But ultimately, what you're going to see and hear from this incredible pastors is their clarity that they either have or they're looking for in each season. How many of you feel like you have co-pastoring figured out? Raise your hands. Yeah, I know, none of us. And yet, isn't it incredible that God uniquely gifts us and complements the spouse, one of the spouse's gifts with the other spouse? And so these couples are going to pour out of their wisdom, but they're also going to probably be, like all of us, authentic in saying there's stuff that we're still trying to figure out. I know for Joanne and I, God has uniquely gifted Joanne in the education world, but there's also a call to full-time ministry. When I say full-time, I don't mean that ministry outside of the church isn't full-time. But her career and her profession has been outside of the church as well as inside. So there's this, how many of you live in this two worlds where you're straddling the two and both of them you're on mission, right? So that's one of the things we've worked through and continue to wrestle with. What's God saying to us in this season? So we're going to ask a couple questions just to get this party started. I'm going to turn it to Joanne here. And we are sharing a mic. You're actually going to get a picture of co-pastoring because we're sharing a mic with each couple, right? So that's probably your front line of that. So, all right, I'll turn it to my love.
Okay. So speaking to the ladies in the house right here, I would love it if you each could take a moment, or anyone that feels led to answer the question of how would you coach other wives that would approach you, whether it's about ministry, marriage, family, being a mom. How would you coach someone that would approach you in that way?
We'll just go down the line, shall we? Okay. Well, Chris and I have been co-pastoring for like 90 days, so we're fairly new to this experience.
When does the book come out?
Yeah, it's going to be a minute. But in terms of what you would say about coaching, the thing I think I've learned most these last 90 days is that I have to be true to who God's called me to be and just really shore that up. Yeah. There's so many great examples now of co-pastoring. I'm so thankful for that. There's so many great examples of women in ministry, of women as lead pastors, women co-pastoring. Yeah. It's amazing to see those as examples, but it's really hard when you start making them prescriptive to your life. And that held me back at first into stepping into this assignment because I assumed that all the highlight reels I saw were prescriptive and I needed to be able to do all of those things. And learning that I needed to really hear from the Lord on what exactly He's calling me to do and all the things that He's not asking me to do has been so freeing, and I think the most helpful thing in co-pastoring.
That's great.
Thank you so much, Kara.
I think for me, it's just staying in my lane, knowing what the Lord has gifted me in, and staying there and just doing it to the fullest. So that's short and sweet.
Yeah.
So anytime anyone asks me about, what's it like to lead with your husband, I just always tell people first, you got to fall in love with your story and who you are first. Because I don't think you can do anything for anybody else till you really appreciate the process that you went through and who you're becoming. And you just got to love your story. You got to love who you are. And, not everybody's stories come with, all these wonderful twists and turns, but it makes you who you are.
Right.
And that's what's so authentic. And that's what's going to help you lead, is when you really embrace fully who you are. And then God will start giving you opportunities. The opportunities come, but I feel like you first have to fall in love with just where God has you, who you are, what you came from. Because in your story, God should be the only one that gets the credit of you existing and where you are. And once you do that, man, I feel like it's just, God will just give you the opportunities from there.
So good. So what we recognize is that every team has dynamics, right? So sometimes we think, well, it's going to be a different or harder dynamic because it's husband and wife, right? Or maybe you're on a team where you have a child who's on your staff. But the reality is every team has team dynamics. And every team has dynamics they have to work through, pluses and minuses. One of the beautiful expressions of co-pastoring and team ministry is you get each other. So some of the learning that has to happen with our staff, with us, we don't have to have that because we've had 27 years plus dating of practice, right? So there's some inherent benefits, not just liabilities. But what are some things, any of you, when you think about the greatest tensions you've had to work through as it relates to leading the church, what are some of those and how have you navigated those?
Are we just going to do it every time? We just go down the line like this? Is that how it's going to work?
I was hoping actually to sit where Brian is, so that way I can get it last every time.
He sat down first,
Yeah.
which means he's probably going to get to talk least.
Yeah.
So
Sucks for you, but yes, I think
know,
that's the call.
I know. So I've got some of our staff from Oaks Church here. Hey, guys. And so I have to be really accountable to what I say because they know the truth. But I think one of the things that we learned when we started co-pastoring together, well, first of all, us co-pastoring together is just the identification of how we've always lived together, how we've always led together. But for our church, it hadn't been done before. So Pastor Scott Wilson, he followed his dad, so we're the first non-Wilsons since 1988 to pastor Oaks Church. And so there was a precedent set on how this looked, and there was a lot of pressure for us because we were following greatness. So we came into our assignment with preconceived notions of how it would be. It was actually a surprise to us that we would lead together. But one of the most helpful things Pastor Mark Brewer, our executive pastor, said is the way you guys are leading, you think you're doing it kind of organically, but it's actually bringing a lot of tension to the staff. You need to bring clarity to the roles so they know how to follow your lead well. And so we just thought she'd pop in on meetings here or there, and it would be kind of like this. And he said, you got to formalize it, define the relationship, and label it so your staff has clarity on what the expectation is. And so much of this journey is managing expectations. You guys have heard that talk. There's expectation, there's performance, and the gap in the middle is frustration, right? The only way you close that gap and eliminate the frustration that your team has towards you or you have towards your team is to communicate clearly. We learned early on, if we don't communicate clearly, what we're trying to do together as we lead together, we're just going to keep hurting our staff. And I think in this room and for this conversation, one of the most important things we could do is bring clarity to our roles for our staff so we can move forward in health.
Where are your notes at? Like you have notes on the back wall somewhere. It's so good, man. Gosh, I'm gonna tell you kind of how we started it in ministry. I was actually Herbert Cooper's youth pastor back when they were in the theater, and there were like a couple hundred people. But to me, Herbert was like a legend. I don't know if you guys grew up. He was doing camps and stuff, and so I was like, "It's the camp guy, right? I get to work for him." And so I left there because Christy was traveling and singing, and so I started going through pretty big depression, and it started battling a lot of identity. And like most of you in this room, your church planners, your pastors, you're very driven people. And so I was very driven, and then all of a sudden I thought I had my dream job right out of college, and then now all of a sudden, like literally I sit on my couch, I eat Cheerios in my underwear all day long. I got no purpose. And so I was really frustrated, I was really angry, went through a lot of difficult seasons while her career is like flourishing. And so it was massive tension. I remember talking to, a lot of you guys know Garland Owensby. He was one of my professors, and so I called him. And I was just angry. I was venting. I was frustrated, and at that time, that was back when I was a Mavs fan. That was before Oklahoma City had the Thunder, you know. So I was a Mavs fan, and that's when
stolen from Seattle.
Bro, if you guys could take care of your team, then they would have never come. Like,
I can tell the room's like I don't even know that story. Are there any Northwest, even West Coast people who got my back in this room? 4 of us. Okay, go ahead, Adam.
All I know is you can have Durant, man. We don't. I wish he would have stayed in Seattle. I don't even know what I was talking about, Jeffrey. I lost my train of thought. Oh yeah. So yeah. It's Owensby. So yeah, depression and Cheerios. That's where I was. Got it. And so he said, man, you love the Mavs. I said, yeah. And he said, that's back when Dirk and Nash were both there and both All-Stars. And he said, what does Dirk do when Nash is hot? And I said, he feeds him the ball, man. And he vice versa. And so we talked through that. And he said, Christy's hot right now. Feed her the ball. And he said, it's your time, man. You're just going to feed her the ball. And he said, your time will come in the future. He said, but you need to understand, you guys are a team. And when we probably look at co-pastoring, it's odd that we're on this. We don't call ourselves co-pastors. And so But early on, we defined like this is our role on the team, and so Christy leads in her way, I lead in my way. But just understanding, man, this is like we play two very different roles in the organization, and that's okay. And part of why we don't call her co-pastor is because she doesn't want the pressure. She hates this right now, right? She doesn't like to speak. She's up here because I said, like, we can't do this without you. So, like, it's a co-pastoring panel, right? So, like, that's part of it. And so she's like, I don't want to do it. And I said, you're doing it. It's fine. I'm new to this CMN thing. We got to do whatever they ask us to do, right? So that's how it played out. So here we are. So she doesn't even like, she doesn't like this. She can get up and lead worship from a million people. It doesn't bother her. This is terrifying. And so what we learned early on is, man, God has gifted us in very unique and very different ways. And so I don't want to put that pressure on her, and she doesn't want that pressure. And so, like, God called me to do this and her to do this. That doesn't make it less. One way's not better, one way's not worse. It's just different. And so that's how we do it.
Yeah.
So just to let you in my thinking in this, which has changed in the last probably 3 or 4 years for us, which is like, again, your story. She was raised by a single parent. If any of you were raised by single parents, we think single moms and dads are the best in the world. I don't think it was God's plan. And so like we don't, like it's not like I'm the lead dad of the house. You know, we mom and dad co-parent at home. And so I just feel like our 4 kids do better in life having mom and dad there. And so we just feel like church is family. And so it's just, I think that's why Paul said, if you manage your family well, you can manage the church well. I just think our church does better seeing spiritual mom and dad, and so it's just a mindset that we have, I think, of just doing that. Also, again, Adam, with what Adam's talking about, we've always taught our team that, everyone has strengths and weaknesses. Your strengths give you a role, your weaknesses give you a team. That's really played out well in my house. And so, like, when we talk about roles in the house, there's things that she does, like, in our house that I just would just stink at. I'm just not good at. So I'll focus on my strengths, she focuses on hers. And then the church world is the same way. So we're spiritual mom and dad of the church. I think on a practical sense, on a Sunday, I think the way it looks practically for us is, I'm preaching, she's praying. Like there's a prayer moment that she does every single Sunday. I think early on, I had a leader that actually pushed against this. It was just a bad decision I made, even hiring this person. But I think he was like, man, you need to almost like push your wife away from stage presence and all that stuff. And all I know is this, is that she consistently gets up and prays and speaks just a mom moment and a mom prayer every Sunday. I'm pretty sure if I don't preach, people are okay. But if they miss that moment, like it's I hear about it like all week. Like you preach good, but man, that prayer just rocked my world, And so I just feel like our church loves to see that working together, that spiritual mom and dad.
Yeah, I love hearing that. And speaking of family, I'm from Hawaii, so it's all about the aloha spirit, ohana, no one gets left behind. But speaking of family, for many of us in this room, we have kids. And whether it's, loving on our own family or loving on kids of other people that come to the church, we know that when things are great on the home front, when things are great with our kids, we're often great and are able to love our church family. What can we encourage those of us that are parents as far as, man, when our family's not doing well, this is what we do. Like, because the home front's got to be first priority. If you're not doing well, we have 2 boys, they're 25 and 22, and we've always told them privately in our home, if we're not loving you, if Dad and I aren't making things right in front of you here in our home, we have no business having the microphone on the platform at church. So we serve in our home first. What are some things that you've done that you can encourage all of us as far as on the home front, taking care of the home front first before you take care of our church family?
So I'll set you up and then hand you the mic. So the last 6 years I've done Jeffrey's job, the CMN director, and traveled quite a bit. And Kara was full-time stay-at-home mom. And those are the best years for our family in the history of our marriage. So she has all these superpowers, and she decided to apply them to being a great wife and a great mom. And those are the healthiest years of our marriage. And so coming back into lead pastor role, that was the plan, is that we would just follow that pattern. It worked really well. And it was a surprise to us that Kara really wanted to be involved in that way and kind of morphed back into co-leading together. The biggest tension outside of the staff and how we clarify roles in front of them was making sure our boys were okay. We just moved to a new city. They're at a whole different season of life than when we pastored before. And that was a big tension point. How do we make sure we're doing what we need to do to take care of them? We only have a few more years left with them in our house. And so that before we could say yes to this, we had to wrestle through that with a counselor. So if any of you are considering co-leading officially, get counseling, get a coach, talk to some people that have done it one-on-one. And we went through a process. Our board spoke into that process. And so another tension, and I'm going to let you talk about how we handled that, but we were trying to create a culture with our staff post COVID being out of the office, where we're in the office these hours and kind of an office culture and kind of re-upping on that. And so it felt a little weird to say, no, but she's got a flexible schedule. She's the exception. And that's what you're going to get from a lot of people maybe, or you're going to have a fear about that is, well, what if we're the exception to the rule we're trying to set for our staff? Massive tension that we had, and we still wrestle with that now. But why don't you just process through, Kara, kind of how you handled that and what we're doing about that?
Yeah, well, our coach simply said to us when I shared that concern, that just doesn't, I'm a 1 Enneagram, so I really care about rigid and everything's right or wrong, So as I shared that tension with him, he said, they don't want the comparison. Don't bother start trying to compare with them, their work hours to your work hours. They're not going to come out ahead on that. So that's not going to be a helpful explanation to give to them. It's just not a weight you're designed to carry. And our staff is gracious. Our staff is mature. They understand there's a different weight to being lead pastors than there is to being staff pastors. So I think that we didn't pretend like it didn't exist. We just simply said, there is this exception. You don't want to trade hours, I promise, right? This exception in the schedule. And they understand that, and there wasn't kickback. So I think just simply acknowledging it went a long way, instead of trying to pretend like it was something it wasn't, or trying to deceive, or trying to hide. So for us, what's worked out is that, I come up on Mondays, because those are our meeting days, and I'm always there on Mondays, and then I tend to come up on Tuesdays as well, and then the rest of the week, especially Thursday, I say, that's my mom day, that's my day to hear from the Lord. That's I don't take meetings then. And as you know, as a lead pastor, it's not meetings that are the issue, it's coffees, lunches, breakfast, phone calls, DMs. It's all the ways they have to access you and all the contact they want. And I am happy to say to somebody when they ask me for that, I only have these spots each week in my schedule for those kinds of things, because it's so important to me to still be available to my family. And so I'm not available for another lunch or coffee or breakfast until this date. I would love to do it on that date. Sometimes it's 6 weeks out. Sometimes it's 8 weeks out. But when I've simply said, it's so important that I'm caring for our family in this way, and that I just don't fill up my schedule, I don't have anybody kicking back. And anybody that would kick back, it's I automatically know I wouldn't want to please them anyways, because they're asking for something that it shouldn't be a yes. So
they don't get to dictate your calendar or your schedule, because they don't know you at your best.
Right.
You do.
Yep.
P.S. They're not your children's parents.
Right.
Yeah.
I think for us, we've learned a couple of things. One, we want to bring our kids along the journey with us, and so we have 3 campuses, and the second and third one, my kids actually think that it was their decision, because we would drive them to the building, be what do y'all think? You want to pray about this? Should we start a campus here? Should we do this? And they're so they're praying in the back of the car, and they're like, Dad, I think we should do it. I'm like, I think you heard from God. Let's do it. Right, and so we try to bring them along in the journey. I talk to my kids; they're 9 and 11, so they're young. But I talk to them about stuff that some of my staff don't even know. I let them in. This is what's going on in the church. This is the email Daddy got. This is some of the this. Hey, yeah, we had to let somebody go. This is why we let them go. And so we just want them to feel like they're a part of the journey with us. It's not hey, it's mom and dad's thing. It's hey, we're in this together. And I think the greatest joy for me is my son at 11 to be able to say he loves soccer, plays literally every day, but say, Dad, I don't want to be a professional soccer player. I want to take your job. And I think as long as he has that heart of because he sees it as that's better than professional soccer. I love that. And so we want to bring the kids along the journey with us. And then early on, I'm a pretty rigid guy too. I told all of our kids workers, all of our kids ministry team, don't treat my kids different than any other kid. And I've totally flipped on that. Not that they can be disrespectful, but my kids are different because they're there 97 hours, right? And so, they are different kids, and so now we do treat them a little bit different. They have a little bit different access. They're living in a fishbowl like other kids aren't, and so we do treat our kids different because at the end of this, I want them to be healthy and again be in love with the church. And then we also do stuff like they play a lot of soccer tournaments, and we take them, and it's all over 3 or 4 different states, and we take them on Thursday or Friday, and they play on Saturday. Then we come home, and somebody else watches them, and they play sometimes on Sunday. But what we started doing recently is we'll leave Thursday and pull them out of school. And so I've started pulling my kids. This is where they'll probably be bad for the one. The one, Enneagram 1 will like that. But they make good grades, and as long as they make good grades, we're going to adjust and even pull them out of school and spend just some family time just so they know they're valued, they're important, and the church is not taking away from family time because Sundays are shot, so they're in school Monday through Friday. We have Saturdays, and then Sundays are gone, and so trying to figure out times where we can say, man, let's cheat on this so we can make sure that they feel valued and they're the most important things in our lives. So.
Yeah, so we're probably totally different, again, backgrounds on this. So I'm way bent on my upbringing. So I'm a PK, again, great upbringing, but the last thing in the world I ever wanted to do was be a pastor. The last thing I ever wanted to do was work in a church. And so because of that, I think my whole bent is the opposite of that with my kids. And so one, and maybe not everyone can do this, but if you're in a lead pastor position, I think you can do this, which is we put budget money in the budget for staff kids. And so we spoil all of our staff kids, like they're getting Christmas, they're getting birthdays, they're getting special summer treatment, and we're going out doing stuff. Same thing, I don't put up with people in the church parenting my kids. And so I always believe God has a process of discipling my kids, but the people in the church are not part of that process. And so when it comes to, again, they have plenty of people that speak in their life, but when it comes to, you're a PK, you should be different because no, they'll be corrected on that very quickly on that. And so I just want our kids to love the church. I want them to have a lot of fun. I want them to think the dream job, if God calls them, is to work in the ministry and church. And we got one that's pursuing that right now. And so we're excited about that. You probably speak more on that.
No, I'll just add, just bragging on something my husband's always done is like our staff kids. It's not just our kids, but our staff kids. They know they have access to Pastor Brian's office whenever they want.
The candy office.
He's got the candy, he's got the snacks, and they're there for them. And he makes sure they're filled. They can get drinks out of the refrigerator. He don't care.
Thanks,
No. Yeah, their parents love us. Yeah, but we just don't. And the parents know that. They know when their kids leave the office, their pockets are full of something, and we're just like, we don't care. And I just love it. There's one little girl, Harper. She knows that she can come in Pastor Brian's office whenever she wants. She's 5, and she sits on top of his desk and talks to him about all of her issues in life and eats suckers and I'm just like, to me, I wasn't raised in the church, but I'm like, these kids are going to grow up and have such great memories of sitting on Pastor Brian's desk and eating lollipops and leaving with candy and running around the church. I mean, we've done Nerf, gun fights with all the staff kids. I mean, we've just done some crazy stuff with them. But that's what it's about. It's, church is supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be fun. So let's have some fun.
Yeah, so like LED walls turn into Xbox screens, kid rooms turn into Nerf Rival, like with Hayes Machine. And so, we will utilize every part of it for staff kids.
That's so good. Okay, so often what we see in ministry is the highlight moments, right? The highlight reels, okay? So let's peel back all the highlight reels. Tell us about something you've had to navigate where you're like, I don't know if we can do this. And I know I'm like, we just peeled back the layers. Like I went took the knife out. We just cut down to the center of the onion. But this is why CMN Conference exists at a practical level. And these are all super practical. But talk to us about navigating hurt and heartache in ministry.
Maybe Brian and Kelly should go first on this one for once. But
let's start at the end there.
Oh, thank you, Jeffrey. Let's start down here.
You got it, man.
Yeah, I won't go into detail of it, but like 3 years ago, our oldest daughter was like really hurt, really, really bad by somebody in the church. And so it was our quit year. If we were going to quit, it was 3 years ago. We were ready to throw in the towel because, again, I think someone was talking earlier about the process. I think if you knew everything about the process before, I think you would have been, I'm out. Like I didn't sign up for this. like I believe in reaching the one, but it's not for you feel like in ministry you can come against me all you want, but you come against my kids. It's like and so I just think that it took people surrounding us. It took me trusting team, letting other people in, not everybody, but letting other people in just to kind of journey with that. I mean, we preach on forgiveness, but when you have to walk through it personally, and so there's just a lot of that. I think that you can talk more about it, but I mean, it was just really personal. It was just really hurtful. But I believe on the outside of that, bringing the right people in, just that you can. There was people that flew in from other countries, other states within 2 days just to be with us. I mean, I didn't feel like I could preach for a few weeks. It was just tough. But I think just letting other people in that you can trust, that can breathe life into you and help you. I just can't imagine if we didn't have that, we wouldn't have made it.
Yeah, so I hope you caught that. There's networks outside of your church who will pour into you. There's relationships where they're trusted voices. And they don't have to be way ahead of us, but they have to care enough to show up when things go sideways.
I think there's a couple things that we do, I think. And Christy and I, we're both very passionate people. And every time, just so you guys know, every time I say, do you want to say something? She's like, no, I don't want. So I'm trying, but, whatever. But we're both very passionate. And man, we can get into it pretty good. And so, is that fair? Yeah, and we don't really have a filter in front of our staff. In fact, one time a staff member sent me an email and said, "You guys have made staff meeting pretty awkward a couple times," and so we don't argue in staff meeting anymore. It's healthier now, so we've had to navigate some of those issues. So we're still trying to figure it out. But I think one thing that we've done, because there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of heartache, and especially as the church has grown, and everybody's excited about church growth until it happens. I mean, that just means more problems, more issues, more critics, more emails, more lawsuits, and so it's just more of that. And so one thing that we try to do is protect each other. And I'm a big fan of being transparent with your spouse, but I don't tell her everything.
Good.
If there's something that doesn't affect her, that she doesn't need to know, that if she knew would devastate her, would hurt her ability to minister to certain people because of what they said or what they think, I don't even tell her. And vice versa. There's a lot of our staff now that if they get an email that's about me or Christy knows the negative about me, she ain't gonna tell me. Now, if I need to know, they'll let me know. But just trying to be able to protect each other has been healthier for us. What was the other thing I said I was gonna? Oh yeah, and then the last 5 months, it's been a very, very difficult season for us personally. The last 5 months, and so I'm a guy I like to preach, and so I usually do 45 Sundays a year. I think I missed 11 out of 14 Sundays towards the end of 2020, and so just went through a lot of personal stuff. But I think being able to have, kind of like you guys, being able to have a team of people, both internally, our staff, some are here, just the most incredible people on the planet, and then some guys externally, some pastors. That really just came and said, "Man, whatever you need, we got you."
That's great.
And I think one of the reasons why our comeback numbers, I don't know what you call them, but our comeback numbers after COVID have been good is really because they led and I didn't.
Which is actually you leading. I mean, the reality is we have this idea that if we let go of anything, that it's going to fall apart. You actually have to create space for other people. You don't lose influence when you share it. You actually gain more. And us not always being the voice, actually, you position people in a way that they couldn't. And that's that's part of building teams and creating opportunities for people.
So we're new in our role now, and we've got the most incredible team that fight for us and really want to make sure we're healthy. And so this has been a really good experience for us. But part of why it's been a good experience is we learned the hard way the first time around doing this together. So when we replanted our church in 2010, the church started to grow. More money, more problems, somebody said. And it just, we were parenting our boys who were little. We were parenting a very young staff, mostly part-time. And we're parenting hundreds of people who were new to Jesus. Mm-hmm. And so that took a massive toll. I made a bad hire, tried to hire an executive pastor too early. That was really stupid. and we had to, transition that person. And then you look around, who can I trust? And there's no one I trust more than Kara. And so Kara had took the title executive pastor. And so it was really good in some ways, but we're like you guys, man, we could carry this thing butt heads all day long. We're wired in a very similar way. And I'm an 8 on the Enneagram. She's a 1. It's actually the most combustible combination, I think, on that deal. And it proved to be true. And so I'm also a maximizer. And so I was in my worst moments trying to maximize my wife. Well, she's not someone to be maximized. She's my wife. So I would say things like, man, she's the most amazing leader. Man, she is a gifted speaker. Why don't you speak on Sundays? You're such a good speaker. And I was trying to maximize her. And just because she could do those things doesn't mean she should do those things. And we were young and we were learning and we were parenting all of these people and trying to fight for critical mass and survivability. And as church planners, we're always just trying to figure out, can we do this thing? Because we're going to make it. And so it was probably the lowest point in our marriage were those years. And why she was so apprehensive to do it again is because I did not do it right the first time. And I had a revelation about that a mentor gave me, that she's not someone to maximize. She's your wife. And so we've learned those lessons, but that created a lot of pain for us. We were in counseling to work through that. And I just recommend getting counseling proactively, not reactively.
Right.
Way better to do it before the problem
Yeah.
starts than when you're bleeding out at the bottom of the hill. And so the counseling probably saved our marriage in those early years. And now coming back into pastoral ministry at this time in our lives, we're way better equipped to let each other stay in the lanes we're supposed to, like Kara mentioned earlier. Anything you want to say about that?
No, those years that we were just trying to survive, right? It just feels like if we don't do it, the church is going down. And we can't let the church go down. And I mean, it was just the weight was just so much. And we just lived on this roller coaster. Like the highs were so high and the lows were so low. And when we left NCC and we moved it to CMN and we weren't pastoring anymore, that was one of the things that the Lord spoke to me. Because basically every Sunday we were at CMN, we loved it, but we begged God to let us pastor again. We missed pastoring every moment we were at CMN. We just loved doing it. But one of the things I felt like the Lord said was, don't get back on that roller coaster. When I let you go back to pastoring, don't get on the roller coaster, which means the highs can't be too high. And we wanted to celebrate every ounce of anything we're celebrating. We wanted to go really high, but then that also meant that the smallest things could take us so low. And so that was what I felt like, I can't do this. If this is what ministry is, this high and low all the time, I can't live there. And so him just helping us, it's just different this time. It's just different. It just feels more stable. Of course, it's a 100-year-old church versus not a 100-year-old church. But we feel more stable. Our minds feel more stable because we're off the roller coaster.
I love it. We want to open it up for questions. And I realize in this big a room, you can get like a stamp in your passport going from one side to the other, okay? So, but if there's questions that you have, we're going to, thank you, JJ. Raise your hand. We want to address questions. Sometimes I'm excellent at answering questions no one asked. So we want to make sure that the questions you might have, that we have a moment. So while you're formulating a question, I do have one, and I'd like 10-second responses from anyone who wants to share. How do you stay romantically, emotionally, and physically at your best in a season where it feels like you're running full speed forward in ministry? So it's not just fitness and finances, but like the pizzazz in your marriage, right? Because marriages are the anchors of healthy ministries. Now, I'm not saying if you're single, it's not. But if you're married, your marriage matters, right? You have to invest in it, okay? If you're single, you invest everything you have into being the best man or woman God made you to be in that season. But as it relates to, you're all married. So 10-second responses, any insight. Keeping the flame, clarity, and health, physically, emotionally, spiritually, but also in your romance.
Yeah, real quick for me, I get excited about vacation. So vacation for me is as exciting as launching a campus. I mean, so you may know your big church date. Do you know your big next date and where you're going? We have our own bucket list of places we want to go and do.
Love it.
Yeah, I would just say make a decision and keep your priorities. 10 seconds. Everything's a decision. If it's important to you, if it's a priority to you, make a decision, make it happen.
We don't drift into quality time together. We have to plan it. So it's not real sexy to put it on the calendar, but that's what we do is we calendar big, medium, and small times together.
That's good. Christy, what do you want? What you have?
I was just going to say maximize the moments that you have. A lot of times we don't get a Friday night or a Saturday night to go out on a beautiful date. We just put it may be a Friday afternoon right before we pick the kids up from school, but just maximize those moments and take advantage of them.
I've been reminded, too, how important it is for us to still flirt. You know, like with the 6 years that he was just doing CMN and I was doing my thing and we were just husband and wife to each other, we were a lot more flirty, honestly. Because all we were husband and wife. We weren't coworkers. Yeah. And now that we're working together again, it's really easy to always be working. Yeah. But like flirting, I think, is actually really important, and figuring out how you do that as a couple. Everybody, like, y'all are great. You're all lovey-lovey, warmy, kissy. Y'all are great flirters. You guys are the best. Yeah. So any flirting advice y'all have would be very helpful. I don't know anybody that flirts better than you two.
I don't know about the flirting part, but I know for me on the home front, I can speak for myself. There was a time, this might be more than 10 seconds. Is that okay? Okay. Thank you. So.
You can have all of our 10 seconds.
Oh, he's giving me his 10 seconds. Okay, real quickly, simple. For me, it was when the Lord spoke to my heart and just shared, hey, Joe, you often treat strangers better than you do your husband. You know, you go hard in your career and you have these goals, but what about taking that extra step of just nurturing and caring for him? Because when he stubs his toe, he wants me to say, oh, are you okay? I can clean the house, do all that I do, go do my job, and come home, and there's nothing, and I'm good. But if he mows the lawn, he's like, hey, babe, did you notice that I mowed the lawn? So it's like, for me, practically speaking, it's just that little step of care of noticing a haircut, rubbing his feet. And in my culture, it's a big thing. It's called lomi lomi. And so part of my chores was to lomi lomi my parents' feet or arms and body. And so Jeffrey's like, we got to bring that lomi lomi thing back, you know. So that's for me, speaking of how we keep the flame going for us.
So almost every Sunday that we would be next to each other, we would hold hands at some point. And we didn't do it for anyone else, but I cannot tell you how many people from our church would come up and say, I just love how you guys love each other. And I this is so important. It wasn't for show. Because fake is revealed very quickly. But Joanne always just comes up, and we had to get through this because I would be like sweaty, and it's like the third gathering, and she's like rubbing my back. I'm like, you're rubbing the sweat into my shirt. So we have a deal. If you see us now, we're holding pinkies. I run hot, she runs cold, right? One other simple little thing, she pats me on the butt all the time. And I'm like, well, who else is going to? I'm not playing sports right now, right? I mean, maybe some of my buddies, right? But it's these little things that it's just a reminder that she just cares, right? Do you remember, I'm not just speaking to, we're speaking ministry and marriage, okay, right? So I realize there may be single people in the room, but to those of you who are married, do you remember what it felt like when you were pursuing your spouse? When you would be on the phone for long periods of time, and you don't even like talking on the phone, but you liked her that much. It's coming back to those and saying, what does it look like to prefer the other above myself?
Yeah, we've got a question from
thanks,
Jaime
JJ.
Moreno from Salt Lake City, Utah. And if you want to ask a question next, just raise your hand so that you can give me a second to run towards you.
Hi. As a pastors, leaders, in which area do you recommend a mentor? Can you share at least three areas?
Yeah. We also say to the panel.
What area, Kelly, you want to hit
Jeffrey?
that?
Pastor Jeffrey, just want to also say to the panel to get as many questions in as possible. We've only got 9 minutes left in the session. So.
Okay, good. So we're going to do 20-second answers. Every area. I don't mean that sarcastically. You need a financial. You need a coach who's going to help your leadership. You need a marriage coach. And you know, one of the beautiful things that can provide those are books, podcasts, and trusted friends. But I don't mean that sarcastically. We have voices in many, many, many areas of our life. Good question.
Can you all just speak to kind of the practicality of, especially those of you that are co-leading together and you're in meetings and doing a lot of that type of stuff, being on the same page before you go into a meeting, remaining on the same page in the meeting, talking through what just happened in the meeting. Just talk through some of the practicalities of that, because there's a dynamic there, right, that doesn't exist with the other staff members. And so when you would speak up, maybe not be for an idea or, something like that, it comes out differently in a meeting. So just talk about just kind of being on the same page. What do you do to make those steps?
Well, we're definitely still figuring that part out. Again, since we're so new at this, I think he and I both kind of know which parts of the church I tend to want to speak into more, what parts he wants to. So if it's like a production thing, if it's something around teaching or speaking, if it's like a graphic, if it's a video, those are the things he has that eye for, that he cares deeply about. And so if we're in a meeting, they're asking us that, I'm going to defer to him and have him go first, and then I can add to that, but I want to make sure I'm not going to contradict him on what I know are his expertise and what he cares most about. If it's like a system question, if it's a relational question, those are the kinds of things I'm going to have more of a bent towards. So he's typically going to let me respond first, and then he'll either second it, or if he has a concern, he'll speak up. So that's one of the ways we've kind of started. We know which area kind of that he's going to go first or I'm going to go first.
We just have to make sure we don't triangulate with the staff, that they go to her, get a response, they come to me, get a different response. And we always have to make sure that if you hear from one of us, it's the same answer. And if I'm upset with the answer that she gave, then we're going to own that. I'm not going to put that on the team to the best of our ability. So.
Hey, I'm just going to take a minute. I actually have a statement, not a question. I just have a word of encouragement. So we co-pastor, and when God created woman, he created her as a help. And that word help is the same help that David said, where does my help come from? It comes from you, the Lord, maker of heaven and earth. And just that word of help it's a holy help that when we are serving together, when we're leading together, it's a holy union. And I just want to encourage you, we can talk logistics and who's doing what, who's carrying this part, but really I just want to encourage you, it's just a holy union that when you're leading together, you're doing something that God designed in the first place.
Great.
So.
Thanks, Hannah.
Hey, how do you handle disagreement in making ministry decisions together?
Not for someone else, not for us.
Yeah, someone else is dealing with that. Go ahead, guys.
I think for us, I go back to the scriptures on submission. And I'm just kidding. It's a joke. It's a joke. Relax. Everybody's like, oh.
He's got that highlighted in his Bible.
Yeah, Everybody got real uncomfortable real fast. Like, what's he going? No, I think it's like what Chris was just talking about. I mean, you try to work it out on the front end, but in front of people, you just honor each other. Yeah, and sometimes that means you bite your tongue and you think, there's no way this is going to work, but I'm going to let her do her thing. And then after the meeting's over, then we're going to come off, we're going to talk through it, we're going to fix it, and then we're going to move on. And we're going to but we're always going to be unified. And so we're always going to honor each other in front of people, always be unified in front of people, because we've learned, my staff knows, especially Robin has been with us day one, they've seen the opposite. And I just, like, they've seen us not honor each other and not be on the same page. And man, it wasn't just unhealthy for us. It was unhealthy for the whole staff, which then all that bleeds over into the church. And so we've learned. Again, I'm a hothead, so we've learned to just really back off of that and to honor each other publicly and work through differences privately.
We've got our last two questions here.
Can I just say something? Disagreements, that's natural. And it's going to happen. It's because you're two different people. You have two different opinions. And disagreements aren't a bad thing. It's timing. Timing is what you have to work on, is when you discuss that. For example, if we just had a major staff meeting, there's something I didn't agree with or didn't think that we clearly spoke it, I'm not going to say, let's go to your office and talk about this right now. There's timing is everything. Is everything. So disagreements are natural. Don't feel bad about them. Don't feel guilty, but pick the right timing.
Wisdom. So good. Last two questions, and then we're going to bring close to this session.
Thank you. What is the advantage of co-pastoring that being, just having one lead pastor doesn't have?
Man, I can tell you our church is so much stronger and so much better with her voice and investment in it. Since we kind of have shared with the staff and now with the church that we're co-leading, I mean, it has awakened something in our church that I think was laying dormant. And it was giving, especially for the women of our church, of an example for our daughters out there in the church, like a model in public leadership that is really strong. And we're a church of a lot of strong women in leadership. We're just really blessed in that way, and it adds so much strength to our church. And we get to now double the amount of meetings, projects. There's just a limitation to my time and to what I can speak into. We've expanded that now that she's kind of officially in this role and we're leading together. So I think it makes our team, makes our church stronger, both in the example that we're setting for others and actually the effectiveness of what happens every day.
Yeah, I mean, we know in Genesis it says God created male, female, and let us make man in our own image, and the two will become one. So I just think we represent God in the best way together, not separate. And there's just an anointing when we're together that's better than we're separate. There's things she does and it's like double impact. If we're one, when she speaks, I'm speaking. We're not in competition. Like when she speaks, I'm speaking. When I'm speaking, she's speaking. And so it's just a reflection of who God is. And our church needs to see that in an age more than ever before. They need to see healthy female, healthy male leading together.
And I'll just say this to close the conversation. You don't have to co-pastor to have the value of a male or female voice heard. If you're a woman and you're the pastor in your church, you need male voices engaged in your church. And simultaneously, if you're a male pastor in your church, it is just a miss if you're not getting female voices, because there's wisdom, there's insight, there's discernment, there's supernatural favor that rests on her that doesn't rest on me. And it doesn't compete with, it complements. But you say, well, we don't live in a culture where we're co-pastor, or maybe you're on that journey. It could be a few months or years. But don't wait until you're called that to leverage and lean into the gift of the man and woman leading and serving your church.
So good. Last question.
Oh, great. Okay.
As ministry teams, how do you handle pastoral counseling?
Pastoral counseling.
Conflict.
How do you handle that as a team?
I think he said pastoral counseling.
Counseling.
You nailed it.
Adam said outsource it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we actually have, at our church, we have a really phenomenal pastoral care team that handles a lot of that. Now, it doesn't mean Kara and I never meet with people, but we often meet with people together. Especially, I would never meet with a woman without Kara being there, and vice versa. So that kind of goes without saying. But, at this, we don't do a whole lot of counseling anymore. But we do a lot of that. If we do it together.
I would actually encourage pastors, and I don't know you, so maybe you're the best in the world. I'd actually encourage pastors to counsel a lot less. Usually we're not very good at it. Usually there are people that's what they do for a living. That's what they do all day, every day. They're trained for it. They went to college for it. That's what they do. And so for us, what we usually do is I don't meet with somebody on our staff usually. We'll meet with somebody, and then we outsource it. We want to... I might be able to figure out how to stitch somebody up if they get a cut, but I'd rather send them to a doctor that's really, really, really good, that's actually going to help them to where the scar heals quite a bit better, and it's not even noticeable. If I stitch somebody up, it's there for life. Yeah. And so for us, I just encourage you, step away from it. Meet with them, love. People need to feel your love, but man, for us, we're gonna do our best to meet with you, and then outsource it to somebody that's what they do.
Hey, we are a tribe of honor, and these pastors gave so much of their time. Would you please stand on your feet and just say thank you one more time to all of these pastors for their time, their wisdom, their spouses, putting the time and the effort in. Thank y'all so much for sharing with us. We are better because of it.